Welcome to Beyond the Headlines. I'm Michael Lenz. Since 1974, the LA Group has literally helped shape the landscape here in Saratoga Springs and throughout upstate New York. This landscape architecture and engineering firm is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. I'll spend some time talking with one of the principals, Mike Ingersoll, about the impact the LA Group has had on our community when we come back. Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. Mike Ingersoll has been an integral part of the LA Group here in Saratoga Springs for over 30 years and has played a significant role in helping to shape the architectural landscape of our community. I'm so happy to have Mike joining me in the studio today. Mike, thanks for coming in and visiting with us for a little while. You know, as I said in the opening, the LA Group had a major impact over the last 30 years on shaping the regional landscape here in Saratoga Springs and really around the region. Now, I know you've been with them for 32 years. I don't want to date you, but let's go back a little bit. What brought you to Saratoga Springs and what ultimately got you involved with the LA Group?
Well, first off, thanks for asking me to come in.
Sure.
In 1982, when I got out of college, there weren't many jobs. I did apply to a firm. It was called the LA Partnership at the time, and I came up for an interview and I got offered a job. Now, I was familiar with Saratoga Springs. My mother grew up in Schenectady and they had a family camp in Adirondack, so we would often come for the races anyway. So it was kind of a neat opportunity. I think there were 4, maybe 5 people in the firm at the time. It was a very different place, as you know.
Well, Saratoga Springs is a little bit different back in 1982 than it is today, right?
Were you in school yet?
I was a little bit young. I'm a little bit younger than you, Mike, but yeah, I was in school.
So from there, the firm started to grow. I'm still, the partners today were there then. Jeff Anthony was a founding partner and Bob Lever. Bob's since passed away. But Joe Sporco, myself, and Jeff are the primary principals in the firm. We have several others, but they started the firm 40 years ago this year.
Yeah, I know you're celebrating your 40th anniversary in 2014. I know I was reading an article back, you know, we talk about the recession, right, what happened back in 2008, 2009, impacted a lot of businesses, right, a lot of families, a lot of homeowners, but one thing I think people don't realize is some of the work that you do was really dependent on a lot of the state and local and federal funding, right?
We were pretty fortunate to early on diversify our services. A lot of people will see myself or Dave Carr in the firm at the planning board or locally, but really that's probably 15–20% of our business. We do quite a bit of federal Veterans Administration work, which today on the news seems to be a topic, but in the cemetery divisions, also state parks, SUNY campuses. So when things started to tighten up, it took a little while. The first year we were still finishing things up, but then there was really a closing of the door and things clamped down pretty hard. But luckily we had a balance of other work that kept us going.
Yeah, you have to have a diversified portfolio.
Absolutely.
Certainly to be competitive, right, in general. Now I know, again, not to further date you, but I just want to mention that in reading a little bio on you, I know your bio, I could probably spend the half-hour show just reading your bio. Pretty impressive. A lot of work under your belt. But you know, you've also gotten some awards. I know you got an award from the ASLA. You got a Practitioner of the Year award.
Yeah,
and that's probably a pretty nice honor.
Yeah, it was actually kind of out of the blue. I didn't realize they were doing that. I got contacted. I think they usually have a couple candidates we submitted and got noticed. I think it was last year. Maybe it was the year before. Went out, got an award. But it is interesting. You continue to do your work, but it is nice to be recognized by your peers and competitors. But yeah, that was a great honor. It's actually wasn't sought out, so it's nice that way.
And I know the Luther Forest Tech project you got mentioned in several magazine articles as well nationally.
Right, we were actually fortunate. We got brought in the very beginning with SEDC, and on the team, there was quite a team of people. So we were I would say the land planners and strategists and pretty much everything we laid out is where Global Foundries ended up. We're still working on ways to bring more development to the rest of the campus, but the infrastructure, the roads, the environmental reviews, the 75 public meetings.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about that. I mean, that was a long process, wasn't it?
Process.
And there, you know, you had the goal in mind, certainly of what you wanted to do, and but you know, I think again, your experience with those local planning boards and zoning regulations probably helped considerably in that process, right?
Yeah, you know, we actually started that process pre 9/11, so there's a lot of things happened in the last 14 years.
Tell me a little bit about what exactly the LA Group does. People hear LA
Sure.
Group, you know, they think, we know it's landscape architecture. It's also engineering, though, as well, isn't it?
Yeah, we have civil engineers, land planners, some environmental scientists that do wetland work and ecology type, but it's primarily anything outside the building to get you in the ground. So that affords us, we do not have architects on board, surveyors, or either, but that allows us to work on a lot of diversified projects with architecture teams in and around the state and the region. So we team well. We've got a great staff of almost 40 people now. You know, it's the best staff we've ever had. There's a lot of really creative people. So that gives us an edge, I think, to help other professionals secure their work. We're often, on the development side around here, we're often at the table well before the public sees it. I know you had Sonny Bonaccio on, but you know, we're sitting in the corner often well before the things come public with Sonny and others. But we also have, you know, the firm is set up to do a lot of resort work, whether it's at Gore Mountain, Tupper Lake is one we've been working on for a while. But ski areas, golf courses, I mentioned college campuses, and right now state parks is a big, we won a couple term contracts with them, so they're keeping us busy, and the veterans work. So a lot of different pieces. I think when you're upstate, you need to be a jack of all trades a little bit to keep going. So it gets us involved in a lot of things.
And I know that you guys have recently gotten involved even throughout the country through some of the cemetery work that you've done.
Right.
I know that there are so many projects that you have been involved in over the years, and we're going to try to touch on as many of them as we can in the time that we have. And I do want to get focused on some of those specific projects, and we'll do that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get into some of those specific projects.
No problem.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. I'm here today with Mike Ingersoll from the LA Group. We're talking about some of the work that the LA Group has done over the years and what you've been working on specifically. I know one of the projects that's been in the news recently is the Adirondack Club and Resort up in Tupper Lake. Pretty contentious debate over this large development. It continues. The debate continues. There's a lawsuit now, I think you told me, up into the Supreme Court. Some supporters have released a poll recently showing that most people up there want this development to come forward, but there's also been a lot of opposition to it. So specifically, what has your role and the LA Group's role been in this particular project?
I'll speak. I'm not that intimately involved, but the firm certainly as a whole over the last 10 years has been involved. We assume the role, again, similar to you mentioned earlier at Luther Forest, with the general land planning, environmental analysis, and assistance with the permitting. Within the Adirondack Park Agency, if anyone's tried to go through that process, it's certainly a rigorous and intense review. Our firm's been modeled, a lot of what we do is after the Adirondack Park's model for analysis and review, so that we were a natural fit for the team. You know, it's an interesting project, large piece of land. Went through a very rigorous review and made it. You know, which I think people in the Adirondacks have had to live with those rules. If you make it past the gatekeeper, you've pretty much done your work. Now, some people may not have been happy with that, but the interesting thing, I think, in the untold story, with those that may not be happy, there was a long period of arbitration and meeting with these entities. Some showed up, some didn't. So I think anything you do isn't perfect, but the project is sound. It was viable. It's still viable, and I think people up there are still really need a shot in the arm.
And you told me when we were off camera that the studies that have come out recently
Right.
showing really the decline in the economy, but also in the decline of the population base up there.
Yeah, we actually brought with me, which may be something you guys want to pursue. Several years ago, there was a study of the entire Adirondacks that was put out on the demographics and really what's happened. It's not really meant to assess the impact of the rules and regulations, certainly shifts in demographics and whatnot, but the new numbers that were just released at the Adirondack Consortium this week are startling. You know, the population base is about 130,000 now. It continues to decline at a rate of about 450 to 500 people a year. Simply the paper industry, other industries haven't been able to continue. So population-based jobs, people leave, graduates leave. Not that the Adirondack Preserve is the end-all savior of that, but efforts to preserve and sustain hamlets and communities are certainly why people probably would be behind it. But this is a very factual report. Sometimes people don't like straight facts, but that's what it is. It's a tough place to survive unless you're coming in to visit for the weekend and have that ability to come in and go. So I think that's the other trend, is a lot more privatization and private homes, tourism and those type of things. So, but sustaining school districts, 2 school districts recently closed, the travel distance for EMT and fire departments between town to town, maintaining the roads. It's an interesting situation, unlike many places around the country. You know, national parks, this is called the Adirondack Park, but it's really a living organism. It's not a preserve per se, funded by the National Park System.
Right.
So,
now, you had mentioned, I think earlier, that where we are in the process. Tell us again, was it at the Supreme Court?
yeah, as I understand, so the original approval was challenged. It was found that a couple of the points had merit to go further. It was then approved again, but then challenged again at the Supreme Court. So I believe a couple weeks ago, testimony and questions were asked by the Supreme Court. That's since adjourned. They now are in deliberation to see what the end-all would be. So,
And presumably at this point, if it were to pass the Supreme Court, they're ready to go. They have
yeah.
investors lined up.
And it's also important for people to know that it's not the day that it's if it's approved by the Supreme Court and they withhold or uphold the APA's findings. There's still a whole series of Attorney General reports. There's Department of Health, DEC, permits. So there's a lot of work to do to get to a closing. But
That's a major hurdle.
a major hurdle, yep. You know, half the land, over half the land set aside in forever wild and public access too. People don't understand that. But it's been a contentious situation, which, as you know, when we've worked on things at the city, it's never really a good thing in the long run, in my opinion. You'd like to be able to mitigate and arbitrate and get to common ground, but hopefully it's close, at least.
Well, and you know, as we said, I mean, it's tough to find the right answer because we know economically things are tough all around, and certainly up in the Adirondack Park area and Tupper Lake region. So you hope that some common ground can be found so that potentially the project moves forward if that's what's determined. But I think, as you said, it's nice to be able to find some common ground so that everybody at least feels that their voice has been heard and the project moves forward and moves forward. So I want to shift gears a little bit. You had mentioned some of the government work that you had done. I know you've really seen a pretty significant increase in your government veteran affairs work, in particular with the cemeteries. I know you started with the Saratoga National Cemetery
which is now the Jerry Solomon. He was very instrumental in that movement.
Is it true that you're doing over 50?
We've done over 50, yeah. Well, actually, my partner, Joe Sporco, heads up that role, but within the office, now it's well over 50. What's happened after Saratoga, it became on budget, on time, and it became kind of a showcase. That was a few years ago. But as you move around the country and you do more of these, we're one of the few consultants that teams up. We're just finishing a project master plan out in Omaha, cemetery for the Alleghenies near Pittsburgh. We've been in Texas, trying to get into Colorado. There may be some more around. We actually are just finishing up the beginnings. We were awarded the Vermont National Cemetery. And those projects are interesting because they're the one time maybe the landscape architect is the lead.
You like that, don't you?
Well, it's interesting. You know, I like architects. I didn't pursue architecture, but so they're landscapes like in the 1800s. There was a big movement in this country for green space to go to cemetery. Actually, we're, as well as the national work, we're doing 2 cemeteries in Rochester, Mount Hope and Riverside. Mount Hope is famous for Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass and others that came through there. So that's a highly prized. So, but yes, the veterans work is also spun off into some relationships where we'll do peer review and assessments of facilities. So that had stopped for a while, but it's back.
I imagine that once you begin that process, then once you get the reputation for being successful, as you said, on budget and on time, then more work certainly follows.
It does. It's very competitive, as you can imagine, around the country.
Sure.
So we've done at Arlington Cemetery at least 2, maybe 3 different iterations of what could be there, and I'm not sure the status of that at this point, but you know, the VA's changes with administrations, but I think our reputation is pretty solid there.
And speaking of some New York work and regulations, government regulations, I know there was some, you had mentioned there was some stiffening of the stormwater management regulations, and I know that's led to some work out at West Point, right?
Yeah, New York State has adopted some of the EPA guidelines, and the stormwater management is the biggest part of that. I don't know if we have the same pressures, but it's a statewide program, but the runoff and control and how you manage stormwater and clean it before it enters the streams and waters of the United States or New York State has driven a lot of the design solutions. So that's really the driving point. So today, you'll hear a lot more about porous pavement, green roofs, things like that. But at West Point, we are working on a project to help them come up with their first master plan on how to manage that. So that's
pretty exciting. Your company has really expanded quite a bit from the Saratoga region. But when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about some of those Saratoga projects you've worked on over the years and are continuing to work on.
Yep.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. I'm here with Mike Ingersoll from the LA Group. We've been talking a lot about some of the regional and national work that you have been doing at the LA Group. But we do have to remember that you are a local company, and you've done a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous body of work here in Saratoga Springs and the surrounding region. We're going to take the little time that we have left to talk about some of those projects. And I know one that's been out there kind of in the forefront for people is the Market Center at Railroad Place. Everybody sees the new Bowtie Cinemas.
Yep.
You guys were involved in that way back in the beginning, right? Kind of take us through that process.
Well, I think actually, Mike, you may have been mayor when this city adopted its transect zoning, which encouraged more residential development downtown. So the entire Railroad Place was the cue that we're following. So the first part of that, as we came down to, as you know, where the old railroad station is, the Price Chopper model, this is the first and only one they have right now of a mixed use with apartments, gelled early, and then we really had to go through and convince the boards that it was what was in their ordinance. You know, it's on the edge of a historic district. But the whole idea of extending the edge of the city and creating urban infill has really led to things like Bowtie Cinema. Looking there, Informs has just moved in. In the middle of that, Adirondack Trust had built their building. So what we're seeing is the areas in the city that are able to infill and grow. That's the model, and it's actually throughout the state. There have been a lot of planners and other cities that I think are pretty envious of that kind of growth, even with the new garage over there. So I don't think it's done yet, but that's been a great opportunity to implement some of the zoning tools that were thought about years ago.
I know the comprehensive plan has called for that, right? I know
Absolutely.
they're doing a review now of the comprehensive plan. It called for that urban infill and to keep your green spaces green on the outer
correct.
rim.
Yep.
Do you feel that the comprehensive plan is serving the purpose that it was designed to do?
You know, I didn't. I mean, this not well, we work in the city, and I'm not criticizing. I don't think it's that broken. I think that the basics are there. The urbanization of downtown, bringing people and living downtown, is the goal. There's some struggles in pockets around. It always needs to be tweaked, but the change from a village to a city is always interesting. We're still not near the population we were in the 1800s in that area, but in general, it worked. You know, parking is an issue, transportation, traffic, congestion, but those are manageable. They'll get worked out. So yeah, I think it helps steer it the right direction.
Yeah, I like to think that it does. And again, you know, I'm not in the job of offering opinions on this show, but I do feel that when you look at the overall scope as a downtown business merchant, I have seen the comprehensive plan fulfill what it laid out to do. I know there are some people that like it, some people that don't like it, but the reality is that the focus of urbanization in your downtown core has occurred, and that's really what the comprehensive plan called for. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, the greenbelt was to be preserved, which I believe it has, and one of the projects that has come to fruition because of that preservation of the greenbelt is the waterfront project, because the city was able to purchase really the only access point on Saratoga Lake in the city of Saratoga Springs. A lot of people don't realize that. They hear that Saratoga Lake, but Saratoga Springs only has one access point, and it's now the waterfront parcel. Tell us how things coming on that project.
Actually, I think you may have been there when it was purchased. It's gone through at least 3 committees. We've been fortunate to steer through the master plan and environmental permits. I think in about a month, it should be on the street for construction bidding. Mary Epson and I were at a meeting with the Saratoga Lake Association last night presenting Saratoga's project. Stillwater was there with Browns Beach. We think ours is a lot better, but it's a park that's somewhat passive, a place to go overlook the lake as it was historically, well before the waterfront restaurant. In this first phase, swimming is not part of it, but access to the beach for kayak launching, picnicking, and kind of the exciting piece maybe on the upper level is a spot where there's really a small garden and overlook a pergola where you can go, and there's some interpretive panels to tell you everything from Native Americans to the regattas, and a lot has happened in that spot over many years.
The project's going to be phased in, right? There are multiple phases?
The first phase, they've received 2 different grants through the state. It's kind of organizing. One of the big components is taking that large parking lot by the water and taking it away. There's a staircase that'll go down, so you'll drop your boat off, you'll come to the top, overlook, and then go back down. So what we didn't want to have happen, the stormwater regs are a big part of this. We didn't want cars on the water. If you're in the lake, you shouldn't see that many cars, and you shouldn't be driving your car down to the water's edge. That was a basic philosophy. So it's not a plan that's all that different than was presented. It's now just coming to fruition. So the timing's right.
Yeah, it's good. It should be a great project. Looking forward to seeing that happen. I know the residents are as well. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about a program that you got your organization involved in that doesn't get a lot of play in the press, but I know you're pretty proud of it. It's that 1% pro bono program. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's a national program. Recessions can be interesting points to learn from. So to keep people busy in one way, but also for many years the firm has, when it can, donate some time. Sometimes writing checks is not as easy as helping people out. So we committed to a national movement where firms would commit 1% of their staff design time. In this case, it equates to about 600 hours a year. That's the rough formula. It usually goes over or under each year, but that's allowed us to help a number of organizations get some things off the ground and help them get grants themselves. So there's been some exciting interfaces. You meet a lot of people, and it's nice to just help people.
So tell me some of the projects that you guys have been involved in.
Oh, geez. We just finished a garden for Saratoga Bridges that should have a ribbon cutting coming up. We got called in at the end of the 911 or 9/11 sculpture to help there. Up on Lake George, we've helped out at Weowaka. Yaddo, forever, we've helped them. Recently at Wesley, I think maybe one of the ones that is really self-fulfilling but simple. They've recently implemented a community garden that's for everyone, not just Wesley residents. But what it did is I think it really gave people on the Wesley campus a new opportunity to interface with outside people in the community, but to come down and garden, get your hands dirty and be part of and watch something grow is exciting, especially for visitors. We've been there a lot of times just laying it out where people will come and say, oh, it's so great, my mom had a chance to come down here. But that was the kind of a brainchild of Sue Bocan and Brian Neal and put that together.
I saw a quote online where a visitor to the garden shared, this was a resident at Wesley, saying that it gives their dad a reason to stay strong, keep going, and a place where he can teach his 5-year-old grandchild how to get the best tasting cabbage. And this garden has made a tremendous difference for their dad and those around him. I mean, that's pretty rewarding for you.
Yeah, it is. And people that are unfortunate or immobile, we have handicap spots. So and it's not a big grandiose, but it's simple and it works. And that's kind of what it's about, I think.
Well, you know, you've had tremendous success with the LA Group. I know the organization itself over the last 40 years, celebrating your 40th anniversary. Hard to believe that 40 years have gone by, but they have. And a lot of work, a great body of work. We didn't touch on obviously all the things that you do, but Saratoga Springs is lucky to have you and lucky to have your group here, and I appreciate all that you do for this community. So
it's a great place.
As things evolve, I know we'll hopefully have a chance to have you come back on the show, but thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Mike.
You bet. We'll be right back. I want to thank Mike Ingersoll from the LA Group for joining me today, and thank you for tuning in and joining us. I hope you can join me next time on Beyond the Headlines as we continue to take a closer look at the issues impacting Saratoga Springs and the surrounding communities. Until then, for everyone here at Look TV, I'm Michael Lenz. Thanks for spending part of your day with us.